Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's St. Louis Children's Facebook Live event, Ask the Experts, Mental Health Care for Kids and Parents During COVID. I'm Emily Brazel with BJC Communications and Marketing, and I'm excited to serve as your moderator tonight. This evening, we will hear from Dr. Mary Cradock, who's the Director of Behavioral Health and a pediatric psychologist at St. Louis Children's Hospital, Dr. John Paruch, who's a psychiatrist with BJC Medical Group at Christian Hospital, and Dr. Brian Richter, a pediatric psychologist at St. Louis Children's Hospital. While tonight's topic is mental health, I do want to pause and call out that we will not be answering questions that are specific to people's requests for help. If you are struggling with a mental health concern and need help, BJC Behavioral Health is providing free crisis counseling through a grant from the Missouri Department of Health Show Me Hope grant program. This program is free, confidential, and open to everyone. To access these services, call 314-747-7492, or you can text Talk With Us to 6674. Before we jump into tonight's program, we do want to let everyone know that the next edition of this Facebook Live series will take place next week and will focus on pregnancy and newborn health, care, and safety during COVID. So tonight we're going to talk about mental health for kids and parents during COVID. And I was excited to host this session tonight because, like many of you watching, I'm also a parent. I have a daughter in college at Mizzou and a daughter in high school. And just like many of you, last March, we all of a sudden found ourselves scrambling with schools closing and moving to online learning environments. What I initially and naively thought was maybe this would just be a couple weeks at home, maybe it'd be an extended spring break, and then the kids would go back to school in mid-April. But then we all quickly realized that it would last the entire school year. So then I went through the rationalization of, well, maybe the virus will die off in the summer heat and everything will go back to normal in time for the kids to start the new school year. And here we are today, August 12th, and things are anything but normal. So tonight we're going to hear from three experts on the topics of dealing with stress, the unknown, and disappointments from both the kids and the parents' perspectives. We've received many questions in advance of this event, including several questions that have come in from teachers across our communities. And we're going to be covering a lot of those questions that we received in advance, and we're also going to be taking some of the questions coming in through the Facebook Live chat. So feel free to leave your questions along the way. So I think with that, we're ready to get started, and let's kick off the conversation tonight. Let's hear a few opening comments from our guests. Dr. Cradock, do you want to get us started?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm delighted to be here to have this dialogue with you. Certainly, we know there are many, many questions. We don't profess to have all the answers, but we want to bring our expertise as you parents help to tackle, and teachers help to tackle these questions in your home.
And Dr. Richter?
Yes, also really excited to be here. It is such a critical time to be focusing on our behavioral health and mindful of that. And I'm just really excited that we're all here to, dip our toes into this very expansive topic.
And Dr. Paruch.
Again, I'm happy to be here and provide some input into this important topic. There are many things to talk about. One of the greatest focal points that I think I can contribute is the preventative side of mental health. And I'd like to introduce that topic, what we need to do to prevent our mental health issues from becoming problematic and interfering with our ability to function. So I'll try and tie that in from the standpoint of a physician trained as an internist and a psychiatrist, and someone who focuses primarily in on wellness and preventative strategies for optimizing our overall health.
Wonderful. Well, let's jump into the questions. And again, a reminder to everyone, you're welcome to submit questions through the chat feature. Those questions will be coming in throughout the evening. We have some of our questions kind of bucketed under some different themes that we reviewed everything that we received ahead of time and came up with some key themes. And the first theme that we're going to cover is really what we call big feelings, just kind of a little bit broader. And we have them broken into the kids section and the parents section. So let's start with a couple questions about the kids. And Dr. Cradock and Dr. Richter, feel free to just, kind of tag team with each other. One of the questions that came through was about the media and the news. And the news is just really scary to children in general. But with everything going on right now, how can we keep our kids informed but not focus on doom and gloom?
Brian, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an important question because the news is just feeding off of sensationalizing this. And so especially, guidelines to be mindful of in particular are, seeking out sources that stick to the facts, that are age appropriate. There are a lot of good organizations putting information out there. American Psychological Association is one that has a lot of great age appropriate information for kids. And the other is to really limit consumption. Speaking from my own experience early on in this, just kind of gluing my eyes to the news was not working for me. And I think for a lot of families and kids out there, you really just kind of want to stick to the facts, stick to what you need to know, and really focus on limiting that.
So Dr. Cradock, what about if your child is really just experiencing a lot of anger right now? And, whether it's frustration or just anger in general about everything that COVID has shut down for them, what's the best way to help kids calm down?
That's a great question. So a lot of us feel angry about the things that COVID has shut down, to be honest. And so one of the things is listening to your child. Are they just blowing off steam? Are they really sad because they're not going to see their friends and that's what the anger is about? Are they imitating what they're hearing from other people? So really carefully listening is the first step to understand, really, is it anger? Is it fear? Is it sadness that's coming out in a loud voice? And once you know that and you know your child, that'll help you guide next steps. So if the anger is, we had to cancel our family vacation, I don't get to see my friends at school, etc., absolutely, you can validate those concerns of your child. You feel those things too. And so that would be the very first thing I would say. The two things would be listening first to understand what the feelings are behind the loud voice, and then validating those for your child. And then the third thing is, after you've done that, let your child know they can tell you those angry feelings or those sad feelings again, and that together you're going to come up with a plan, because all kids are different. But I would take those steps to really understand what the anger is about.
So let's talk for a minute about the parents, because parents are also experiencing a lot of feelings. So Dr. Paruch, many parents, we are just exhausted from this COVID pandemic, and it feels like it's dragging a lot of people down, and it's hard to feel like you can get a break. What advice do you have for parents who are experiencing these types of feelings?
It's a great time to introspect and to listen to the thoughts that you're having and reflect upon them with someone else, by yourself first, with someone else second, and to express those thoughts to other people so that you can be heard and you can be supported and validated. I think, again, having communication with others that can support your thoughts, your feelings, and can help you understand better what you're experiencing so that you don't feel so alone. I think that's one of the greatest parts of this, that people feel very isolated, they feel very alone, and that's something that can be addressed through some of the things that are media or technologies that help us connect with others in a time when otherwise we're not able to connect in the traditional means.
Dr. Paruch, another question we received ahead of time from the parents' perspectives is, parents are afraid that they're passing along their stress to their child. What advice do you have for parents in terms of managing our own stress and not making sure we're passing that along to our children?
I think first and foremost, you do have to, again, have some introspection and look at how you're expressing the emotion that you're experiencing, and have a channel for taking that emotion and doing something that's positive in a healthy way. In other words, making sure that you're doing things that are conducive to health and well-being overall, getting proper sleep, proper nutrition, physical activity. Those are all factors that really help allow us to live in healthy manners. If you are expressing a lot of emotion and you find yourself expressing a lot of negative emotion, I think it's important that you do something to, again, put it in a positive direction. It's easy to just let it all out and demonstrate behaviors that aren't very conducive to how to handle stress, and your children will take that information and do the same. And obviously that's not the goal. The goal is to demonstrate, model for them appropriate behaviors. So it starts with understanding how you're feeling and introspecting, and then it from there, I think it's important that you take that emotion and channel it into something that makes you feel, that allows you to live in a better manner than you are. But if you don't identify it first, I think that's the key part. You have to identify it before anything else. And sometimes it comes from it's identified by other family members or other people with whom you're interacting. And at that point, I think it might be a little bit too late, but not late enough ever to do something positive about it. And that's what we're here to talk about, what to do.
So let's hop back into the kids section of the questions. One of the questions that came through is for kids a little bit older on the teenager side. A lot of our teenagers missed their graduation, their prom this past spring, and that's you have a lot of feelings of sadness and even some depression coming from that. What can we do to help our kids who are experiencing that, and especially as they're coming to their end of their high school experience and kind of missed a little bit of that closure?
Yeah, I can. I don't mind kind of taking that one. As we're kind of talking about the kids' experience, the parents' experience, when are kids feeling angry, parents feeling stressed, when are kids feeling sad? What can we do to help? The thing that's kind of sticking out to me right now is, this is affecting everybody very differently, right? So the 17-year-old, 18-year-old teenager who's missing out on these activities, I mean, who wouldn't be crushed if they're missing their graduation, fall sports, right? The list can go on. And, versus the 4-year-old child who is staying at home and literally couldn't be happier because they're living their best life, get to see their parents all the time. And so, one thing that's so important that's kind of been touched on already is just to be okay, kind of open up to whatever emotional experience you're having. Dr. Cradock was saying it earlier, just kind of validating that as a parent to your child, kind of checking in, right? If you notice them withdrawing to their room, they're not coming out for dinner, they're, just on their screen all the time, checking in and not jumping to parent reassurance mode, not kind of downplaying their emotions either, right? Because it's so easy to look at someone else and say, they have it way worse than I do, right? Oh, I just missed my vacation this year. All these teenagers are missing these really huge events, right? So my pain, my misery doesn't count. So yeah, like validating, and then also, putting your heads together to get creative. And how can we make meaningful memories? What are the things that we care about, and what can we do to really make that stick now?
Dr. Cradock, let's kind of build on that answer. That was a great way of thinking about it. And we had another question come in around warning signs of children needing help. So Dr. Richter kind of talked about a couple of those. If the kids are being withdrawn, staying in their rooms. But, can you talk about what are the warning signs that a child may need help? And then what steps should a parent take? And are there any resources available?
Sure, absolutely. So one fantastic thing about being a child psychologist is that they come with parents or guardians or others all the time. And so one of the things that we tend to say is that if you are concerned as a parent, you are most likely right. So don't doubt yourself. Go ahead and reach out. Your pediatrician is always a great resource for that. The crisis counseling line that Emily, you mentioned a while ago, is fantastic. You can reach out to our services. We have one where we help families connect to different types of resources in the community. So if you are concerned, that's the best warning sign. Otherwise, what I would say is you're looking for something that's a change. Your normally bubbly kid is suddenly in their room, like Dr. Richter said. Your normally, kind of calm, cool, collected kid is suddenly worried about everything. So you're going to notice those changes. So your own concern about them, which is probably based on a change in their functioning, are the best things. The other thing is, don't be afraid to ask them. If you see something and you're like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't really seem like her, then go ahead and ask. Sometimes parents worry that if they ask, they might plant a suggestion in a kid's head that they're anxious or depressed, or that they even have thoughts of harming themselves. But asking is not associated with any of those things increasing. It's usually associated with getting to the right help more quickly.
And along those lines, we had a question come in through the chat that fits right in here. I'm kind of reading it from my phone a little bit. And this question is, COVID is impacting my child's social life and in turn, their self-esteem and attitude negatively. How can I, quote unquote, help turn it around?
So I would say one of the important things is the why. So again, you're going to listen. Is it impacting their self-esteem because suddenly all of the things they used to do that gave them a feeling of importance and competence, gymnastics, school, swimming, all of these things have gone away? Is it because kids are being mean online? Is it because, there are many different whys? So you're going to notice and then ask your child. Even young children can tell you a little bit about what's up with them often. And the solutions will then follow that. So if you've learned that suddenly whoever they're interacting with online is not a very healthy kind of group of kids to be interacting with, your solutions will be along those lines. If it's that they feel just frankly lonely because suddenly all their what I'm calling three-dimensional opportunities for other kids have gone away, then you'll be thinking about how do you build something in that helps to make that happen. One of my colleagues just before she left tonight told me that her daughter is having a virtual sleepover tomorrow night. And that was the first time I'd heard of a virtual sleepover. So with your child, once you understand more, then you're going to build in those things to address it.
And Dr. Paruch, I'm going to kick this over to the adult side because we did have this question come in as well. And it's the flip side, right? Just as the kids do, adults miss their friends and interacting with others. What suggestions do you have for adults who are craving some socialization right now?
I would reiterate much of the same. I think it's important that we connect. However we do so, however limited we are, there are ways to connect. It's maintaining those open lines of communication with the peer group that we have, and making sure that we reach out to others who we know need support and aren't getting that same support. I think it's a great opportunity and should be viewed as such. It's a limitation if you look at it that way, but I think from the flip side of that, it's an opportunity to be creative in how you approach some of the things that are different in your life, and to sort of look for opportunities to find other people with whom to connect that you haven't connected with in a while, some of the ones that you need, that that you should be connecting with when life is as busy as it normally is. Those are the people that I think really, it's a good opportunity to reach out to them and to find connections with people that who really need the connection. The power of that connection goes far beyond what you'll realize at the time. And I think that's a critical thing to point out to everyone right now, especially in a format where we're able to do so and get the message out to a lot of people.
So now we're going to shift topics a little bit and start to move into a little bit of back to school. We received many, many questions on many different topics within the back to school theme. And one I'm going to start with, Dr. Richter, maybe you can help us with this one. It's around masks and with young children. And we received a few comments from parents ahead of time that some young children, they're just scared of wearing a mask. They're very freaked out by the whole idea. They don't like seeing their parents wearing a mask. But we know that's what we need to do as we're going back into the classrooms and out and about in town. What advice do you have for parents whose children are legitimately scared of wearing a mask right now?
Yes, I am really glad that you directed this question to me, as anxiety is one of the specialties that I see. And I would shout it from the rooftops: exposure, 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 practice, practice, practice. And I think this will resonate with a lot of folks as we're on, what month is it? What year is it of kind of all these changes, that kind of the more you stick with something, the more comfortable that you get, right? I recall in early March having some mild to severe anxiety at the grocery store, right? And now it's there's still some anxiety around there, but it's a lot easier to do. And the same thing with masks for kids. How can we start to get kids even excited about masks? Can they choose their own? Can you decorate them? Kind of whatever is within safety guidelines, and then practicing it, wearing it for just, a minute at home or during their favorite TV show at home. And then can we go outside? Can we go on a walk with it? So practice, practice, practice will really go a long way.
So another question we had come in from the parent perspective is, so Dr. Paruch, if you could take this one, parents are saying, we have to go back to work, the kids are going back to school, and we're afraid of catching COVID. Even as we're taking the precautions, we know that we can still catch it. Some people are saying it's affecting my sleep, my eating, my relationships. What can I do to help ease my own anxiety here?
Anxiety is something that is a fear of it's unease about the unknown or something that's imminent. And I think the uncertainty of this certainly provokes anxiety in all of us. And to be able to understand that a little bit better, I think it's a time to step back, identify it as anxiety, and take a moment to figure out what you do with that anxiety. It's a real challenge to think that we're forever going to be dealing with this. This too shall pass. This will go by at some point. We have to continue to live in the moment and to plan for the moment. And I think investing in some of the things in the moment at the time can help give us a sense of purpose that we have otherwise always had. It's just that it's shifted a little bit, and know that the stuff down the line it will come eventually. But the taking time to be more mindful and to be more in the moment is a critical aspect of this, I believe.
So Dr. Cradock, we received a question from a parent who said their child has always been introverted, and they're feeling like the removal of school and activities due to COVID is kind of making things worse at home. And they asked the question, how can they encourage their children to, kind of get out of their shell or put themselves out there a little bit more during this situation?
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. Dr. Richter earlier mentioned that some kids this is fantastic for them because their normal challenges went away, right? So I'm not a fan of snakes. So if suddenly there were no more snakes, it would be like the best thing ever for me. But for the socially anxious kid or the socially introverted kid, now getting to stay at their home, which is probably their favorite place, with their favorite people is fantastic. So you can still build in small challenges to this. So for and again, I always revert to parents know their kids. So for that child, it might be that now that school's virtual, participating even virtually is a little bit challenging for them. Some schools are having more of what they're calling community time or social time as part of the day. And that might be, an opportunity to say, okay, you're going to participate in that. And what could we set as a goal for you to reach out to another kid? Some families have others, whether they're an extended family or other close family friends with whom they're still doing safe interactions. And those are opportunities too. But I would also say all these things sound easy. They're not easy. Some of them, they're hard. And I would emphasize that, these months where we're not able to do all the interactions we have are not necessarily going to cause any child any dramatic setback in their normal developmental trajectory. So take a little pressure off yourself too, that you have to make perfect this totally crazy, chaotic time in all of our lives that we anticipate will have an end.
Well, that is really good to hear and very reassuring. So let's talk a little bit more about the schools. And we're in an interesting place across our community. Some of the different districts have made different decisions. Everybody's trying to do what's best. Some schools are going back in person. Some districts are doing hybrid models, and some are completely online. And we had a question come in that said that they have just made the decision for their family. Their child is not going. They were going to be taking the online option, and their child is really mad about it. And their friends get to go back to school, and that child's so angry with the parents right now. What advice do you have for parents who are trying their hardest to make the right decision for their own personal family, and their kids don't like it?
Well, that never happens.
That's a tough question. Yeah, I don't mind kind of wading into that one. Again, that is really frustrating for that child, and absolutely, providing explanation for that and rationale is very appropriate, but also kind of hearing your child, again, validating, listening to them, not jumping to just try to make them feel better right away, but kind of sticking with those feelings, right? it is, when a child is experiencing distress, that's also, very distressing for their parent, right? And so there is going to be frustration and anger around that, and it's totally understandable. Again, kind of being creative with whatever decisions families are making, they're getting creative and figuring out ways to make the most of this situation, and kind of asking yourselves, is what we're doing kind of working for my child? Is this working for me in the long run? Is a really important question to ask. So, okay, so my child's really frustrated about not being able to go to school. How can we kind of form those meaningful connections, right? So, okay, them just kind of scrolling through Instagram or Snapchat isn't really benefiting their social connectedness. Can they kind of do some of the things that Dr. Cradock was talking about earlier, or what have you, that might be more kind of meaningful?
Dr. Cradock, we had a question come in through the chat here, and it's really about the younger kids, so about kids who are going back to daycare. And when you think about, just it's kind of the same instance and same development, are there any concerns, or do parents have any concerns about sending their kids to daycare or keeping them home at that young of an age?
I wonder if you're asking from a social perspective or the COVID infection prevention perspective. But I would say that, in general, kids do well with going to those group care situations. And so I would not have concerns in general about that. The other thing I would say is that we've been pretty amazed by how well even young kids are wearing their masks at the hospital. Like I was in clinic a couple of weeks ago, and all these little kids were wearing their masks, probably because they saw their parents and other people wearing them, like Dr. Richter said, sort of exposure to that and role modeling. So the concern I would say you could mitigate by saying, how well does my child normally do with going to group situations? And what are the precautions the school is taking to make sure that kids are masking where they can, kids are practicing some sort of social distancing, and following other strategies where it becomes part of the normal routine to do these things that were not normal for any of us back in February.
So Dr. Richter, this next one's for you. I love this question. It came in ahead of time, and it really stood out to me because it feels so real. How can I talk to my child about going to school without freaking them out at the same time? I feel like all I say is, don't touch that, wear your mask, wash your hands. How can I, as a parent, remain calm and set the example that whereas they need to take those precautions, not freak them out at the same time?
Right, exactly. It feels so high stakes now, and we have to follow these rules, and especially for rule followers or people pleasers, this is like, when has there been a more stressful time for this? So again, putting out those school recommendations, or what the requirements are for that school is important, so your child is informed and knows what to do. But you don't need to keep repeating that over and over again. And can you talk about what could be exciting about school, right? I think a lot of kids are excited about going back to school, whether that is even just virtual, because they can get back to making their connections, or there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to as well in a variety of different situations. So, again, properly informing, but not needing to overdo it. And kind of like Dr. Paruch was talking about earlier as well, kind of moving on to, okay, like, let's focus on what we're doing now and not getting stuck. I mean, I think a lot of people can also resonate with that worry loop, and, oop, I'm getting sucked into that worry loop. Can I redirect my focus to what I'm doing now and not just kind of stay stuck in that misery?
So let's move into kind of a different topic here. I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast that we received lots of questions from teachers in our community, which I thought was really cool. So we have a little section here of questions, and I invite all three of you to kind of weigh in where you feel you have something exciting to share in terms of the answers here. But one of the questions I just thought was such a wonderful question to ask. Our teachers are so amazing all across our metro area here, but it's about connecting with students. So how can I connect with my students without giving high fives, hugs, pats on the back, and without them being able to see me smile underneath my mask? I'm worrying that my mask is going to get in the way of forming a strong teacher-student connection. Do any of you have any advice for our teachers who are asking that question?
I'll jump in on part of that question because I got good advice from a kid a few weeks ago. I was describing, I was wearing a mask and it was weird for me as a psychologist because, faces, etc. And the kid just looked at me and he nodded and he said, well, why don't you tell me if you're smiling? Well, yeah, that's pretty good idea. But so we are having to describe more things that we used to be able to see on faces. And the other point of, I would take from my learning from this boy was also ask the kids what's meaningful to them. We use high fives and pats and things kind of universally, but we might learn that a particular kid really likes something very different, and that can be delivered virtually.
Dr. Richter, can you share, we had some teachers ask, how am I going to know if I'm making good emotional support connections with students who have not been in a classroom for the past 5 or 6 months? And some of these kids may still not be in the classroom. We'll be trying to do that virtually. What advice do you have for those teachers?
Yes, indeed. And just to say to teachers, I'm very biased, but I love teachers. My dad's a teacher. My sister's a teacher. My mom's a teacher, so I'm very biased. I think you guys are going to do great. The fact that we were even getting these questions in kind of shows me that I almost don't even need to answer it, to be honest, because you guys are going to do awesome. You're going to be amazing. Building those personal connections and even just virtually as well, it is a hurdle for teachers, for all of us, kind of coming up in the fall. And so providing the emotional support, especially if you're kind of virtual, how do I even go about trying to attempt that? But again, kind of getting creative. Can you check in one-on-one, very similar to kind of teacher to parents, to our advice to parents from earlier? Don't be afraid to check in. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to hear something that's difficult as well, right? It is so hard to ask for help. It is so hard to talk about your thoughts and feelings. And I'm a psychologist and I struggle with that, okay? So this is hard for all of us to do. So checking in, asking, not being afraid to hear whatever might come up is so important. And looking out for kind of some of that same warning signs as well. I think teachers are very in touch with their students and what's typical for them, what's not. And if you are noticing you might have a concern that might be challenging to bring up to parents, throughout the year in normal circumstances, now is not the time to kind of hide, sit on some information that parents might really need to know about that could help their kid or teen. So, if you are worried, kind of bringing that up as appropriate as well.
So Dr. Paruch, I have one for you here from a teacher perspective, as the adult in the classroom, and the teachers are doing everything they can to make sure all the precautions are taken, but there's still fear. There's still worry. You're still in a room with, 20 plus children. And with the younger kids, it's probably going to be pretty tough to keep those kids to keep their masks on all day. So from the adult perspective for our teachers, what advice do you have in terms of managing their own stress and anxiety in the classroom? Of course, they would never show it to the kids, but how do they cope internally?
A great question. And I would support what Dr. Richter said about our teachers. We have to realize that they're under a tremendous amount of stress to begin with. And as parents, I think it's important that we support them more now than ever, knowing that they have this added layer that they have to deal with. So that being said, the anxiety and the stress that they're going to experience is going to be higher. And from the standpoint of the administrators and above them, and from the standpoint of the parents that support them and should support them, I think it's a good opportunity to connect with them and to check in as well with your teacher and ask them questions. Are you doing okay? Is there anything I can do to make this job a little bit easier for you? If we allow them the creativity they need, I think they're going to be able to function much better in that setting. Some of the things that are going to cause stress will quickly be normalized with mask wearing and things like that if they demonstrate that this is how it is, and their peers will place pressure on one another to wear masks and do the things that they need to do. As far as what they need to do from a stress reduction standpoint, getting proper sleep, getting proper nutrition, eating healthy foods, exercising on a regular basis, checking in and connecting socially with others, I think outside of their jobs is critically important. Forming alliances with other teachers, that's another great way to be able to de-stress and to talk about some of their concerns. They know how the system works generally. The complication is the fragmentation that's going to coincide with the hybrid model of learning. And I think that's the part where creativity comes into play. So being creative in how they handle stress is going to require of them an approach that allies them with their peer groups and checks in with one another to make sure that they're doing okay, and to be able to have an avenue to take that stress and funnel it into something that helps them in terms of their health overall. Avoiding things that are going to cause harm, of course, that's a given. Avoiding use of alcohol or excessive use of alcohol, avoiding things that cause harm, smoking and other health-related issues. I think that's some of the initial thoughts I have with that question. I'm sure it could be more developed with a little bit of discussion, but that's where I think we could start it at least.
Dr. Cradock, my next question is for you. It's still under the teacher category, but honestly, it applies to parents as well. And that goes back to the online learning, the virtual learning environments. And how can we help keep our kids motivated and positive when we're doing these hybrid models or full-time online?
Well, that is a great question. And I think we're all going to learn a lot about that as we are in this very virtual world of learning. You know, again, what we know about this so far, we would have to draw from what normally motivates a child, what normally is their level of interest in learning, what normally are their struggles with learning. And so we can make some general suggestions about how do we motivate kids to do things that they don't like. And usually that's often through introducing some other rewards and things for some of the effort that's there. But then there's going to be some kids who really are going to have a harder time than others with adapting to a virtual world for learning, and kids with specific learning disabilities and other things. And that will need to be carefully looked at with the teacher and the family and others, perhaps, with what is going to really help this child stay motivated. There are other kids out there who are going to think this is fantastic. This is the way they've always dreamed of learning, and it's going to be the best thing for them ever. So it really comes back to individual. How do we reward any of us for doing difficult things? And then for your child, what does that mean? The other ingredient is modeling, really. So if for your own work, or when you sit down to help your child do your work, it is important the attitude that the parent or the guardian takes to that work. One of the last things I would say about it is there are going to be some other real challenges for this. In the springtime, we heard a lot from families who just getting access or having enough devices in the home was difficult. And so depending upon how the schools are supporting the kids with just having the equipment that works right is another piece to think about in terms of how do we help to make it easy, if you will, for the kid to do the right thing, to do the schoolwork.
Dr. Richter, my next question is the last one kind of under this little umbrella. And this was one that came in ahead of time. And I think it's an important one to cover. Since COVID-19 has become political, how can teachers help keep the divisiveness of COVID from breeding bullying among students whose families may have differing viewpoints?
Yes. And thank you for giving me the softball here. Gosh, a few themes as I'm just kind of thinking here, listening to everybody, one of which is it has never been harder and also more important to be kind to ourselves and to others. It's just everybody's kind of a little bit off or under this immense stress. And it is really easy to throw people under the bus for wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. I mean, and I could add 100 other things to the list there. From the educator perspective, it is, of course, so important kind of, from Dr. Paruch's preventative standpoint, kids have to have a safe environment to learn. The academics aren't going to happen. The social emotional isn't going to happen if they don't feel safe going to school and being around people that they can trust and feel kind of accepted in. And so, of course, doing whatever we can to stop that is so important. But man, just being kind to yourself and to others is really the big thing that I was thinking about there.
So our next batch of questions kind of falls more in line with social life, and there's kind of a variety of questions, but there's some really good ones in here. And there was one, Dr. Cradock, you kind of mentioned social media a little earlier, and there was a question that came in around, what is more dangerous for young kids, access to social media or social isolation? And the parents are asking, should I be relaxing my rules on their social media and that maybe their screen time and the time that they're spending online? Do you have any thoughts on that to share?
I have a lot of thoughts. I have no easy answers. The answers that we used to give on this topic are kind of out of the water when we've asked kids to do all of their lives, and actually all of us, much of our lives, online. So I would say moderation, where you can have it, is important. If you have a child or a teenager who's spending all of their time on social media, this means that they're not having a diversity of their experiences, whether it's with you, whether it's physical activity, et cetera, that we think is important, as Dr. Paruch was saying, for really healthy living and really healthy mental health. So they are going to be online more for social connections and for experiencing school and doing their homework. But think about how that you can build in still with that, with your child, how to build some other experiences in there. So moderation, I guess, would be my moderate answer.
Yeah, and I think I would also, much to Dr. Craddock's point, emphasize the need for balance. Balance is key in all ways in terms of health. And what do I mean specifically by that? I mean that for any child to spend an hour on a screen, I think balance that out with an hour doing some sort of activity that does not involve a screen. And even though this is technically online learning, we should allow ourselves to figure out how to do this without necessarily the screen dictating what we do. In other words, to be able to take the creativity of the teachers that are going to allow us to do exercises outside and to explore the environment outside so that we can learn the topic at hand. I think the balance that comes with that is critical, and one of the most important parts of this discussion, to find healthy balance between the things that we know can cause harm in excess and limit those things and allow ourselves to have balance from the health perspective, doing things that we know allow ourselves to exist in a more healthy manner. And if you do those things in a manner in which there's routine associated with it, some reinforcement as to why you're doing those things, the outcomes will produce children who look back at this time as a time of benefit and not of one that was a terrible time in their lives. I think as adults, as parents, as teachers, as physicians, that's one of the most important points that we can make, that this is not a terrible time. This is a time that is different. It's not a time that needs to be squandered with a lot of stress. There's opportunity as well, and it takes a very critical eye to find that positivity hidden amongst the negative and stressful environment that we're experiencing right now. But it's there. I can promise you that.
So Dr. Paruch, let's keep going on that, because, and you started to touch on this, but the question I asked Dr. Cradock was about the kids' screen time and spending a lot of screen time. What about parents? There can be times where, you lose hours scrolling through Facebook and Pinterest and all of that. And in some ways it's a way to decompress at the end of the day, but in the other way, you can go down a whole other tunnel. What advice do you have for parents about their own personal screen time?
Well, this is a fantastic tool, because we're disseminating information to people who might not otherwise have this great information. So I can't completely disregard the importance of social media. That being said, let's tie the idea of balance into that, and let's talk about how we can balance these things out with appropriate amounts of screen time and appropriate amounts of social media. I'll introduce a concept that I would say is relevant. And instead of the idea of just social distancing, which I would prefer to call physical distancing, that's a different discussion. I would like to say that we should entertain the idea of social media distancing as well. And by that, I mean limiting the amount of time that you do spend on social media. It's easy to fall victim to the trap of social media and to scroll, scroll, scroll. In fact, you can look around in public places and see who's scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or any other social media by how they're interacting with their device. In fact, most of the time this happens in public places. You can observe these behaviors for people who are doing this while their children, meanwhile, are not involved or engaged in the interaction. And it's a missed opportunity. So I think setting the phone down, putting limits on the phones. You can do this with technology, and you can limit how much time is allotted. But I do think it's a good time to think about the amount of screen time and reduce it and balance it out in other ways. 2 hours before bedtime, no screen time. I think it's a good time to turn the devices off. I think it's a good time because it does a lot to how we approach sleep, how we set our sleep clocks, our internal sleep clocks. And I think it's a great opportunity in the morning to wake up to sunlight and to get.
Our next question's for you, going back to the social life component. We had a question come in ahead of time about that parent saying that they're very strict with their teens' interaction with friends, and that child's best friend is getting to go out and do a lot of things with other friends, going golfing, and now this parent's feeling like the mean mom. How do you work that out? And and the question is, should we be loosening the string? Should we be letting our kids out a little bit more? Or what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, that is we're all being our own epidemiologist a little bit. And, again, people are making their own decisions and what's right for them. And so if your family has decided, we're going to kind of stay at this level where we're doing X, Y, and Z, not going to restaurants, not seeing other people, whatever, what have you, that's the best decision for your family. And then really kind of operating within that once you make that decision. So how can I now, facilitate validating my child, again, coming back to this validation, listening, and helping to facilitate social connections with whatever kind of level you're in. As we were kind of talking about social media here, so for those families who are really deciding that more restriction is better for them, I think balance is a key word, and I would also add balance of the type of media as well. Not all social media is created equal. When it was my grandmother's birthday the other day, and I made a call to her, and I felt really connected, and that was a great 15, 20 minutes or whatever, versus going on Twitter and you can fill in the blank as to what happened there. And then also, using media in one moment might be something that really is meaningful, even if it is just kind of looking at my friends on Instagram or whatever. And in another moment, it might be kind of taking me away from the type of person that I want to be because I'm using it to distract myself from, uncomfortable or unpleasant feelings or distress. So even the same type of media can be working for me or not, kind of really dependent on the context.
Dr. Cradock, we received a question from a parent whose child has ADHD, and they said that they're really struggling being at home all the time. And they asked the question, how can I help my child focus, burn off energy, but still stay safe?
Oh, good question. So I think that it a little bit depends on what your opportunities are. So if you have opportunities to be outside at your own house, that would be fantastic. If it requires being creative within your house or your apartment, that could help. What I would say is for kids with ADHD, one of the things that we know really helps them is to have some structure. So that for most of us, a lot of structure went out the window, whether I go to my workplace or I work from home, what time my day starts, what the kids are doing. All these are questions that families are having. So I would say create some structure and then build in what is that physical activity that works for your family inside your house, right outside your house at a park nearby. Most of the playgrounds are closed, but the open spaces may be open, and build it in on a regular basis, and it will probably be good for your child and for you.
Another question we had come in under the social life is about teenagers. And the question is, are kids more likely to engage in risky behaviors such as drinking or trying drugs as a consequence of being cooped up for so long, or to cope with anxiety or uncertainty?
I don't think there's any doubt that when stress increases, people handle it in different ways. And some of the ways can be harmful to them, to oneself. That's an example of something that could happen and needs some parental guidance and open dialogue to determine whether or not those things are happening. And I'm going to let Dr. Richter and Dr. Cradock talk more about how they approach this kind of a topic at this time. But I do think that it is necessary to at least know that stress causes people to react differently, and sometimes those behaviors do show more prominently during those times.
Yeah, I would say just in general, we are all under an enormous amount of stress, and safety is more of an issue now than it was, previous to March. And again, not being afraid to check in, not being afraid to confront these really challenging issues. And, these are some things that, if they're happening with your child, who, get help, seek help, go to your pediatrician. We've got the 4514 number, 314-4514, because once you kind of identified this as an issue, it is good to bring some help on board, because this is not easy stuff to deal with, to cope with, to manage on your own. And we really do want to be mindful of our teens' safety now more than ever.
So, Dr. Paruch, we had a question come in, and I feel like Dr. Richter covered this a little bit when he talked about the importance of being kind and kindness.
Mm-hmm.
But this question specifically asked, how do we show support for people who are choosing different paths for school, social distancing, activities, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer for that except to utilize being kind. I think being kind is the approach that everyone should be taking at this point, and trying to pull back and realize that there are differing viewpoints, and accepting other viewpoints is part of our existence. And I think that being kind first and foremost, and realizing that's going to produce a better outcome than the opposite is a critical component of that.
Dr. Cradock, we had a question come in that had some fun commentary around it. I chuckled when I saw it a little bit, but it says, "My family's driving me crazy. We've all been home together 24/7 for months now. I love them, but I need a break. What advice do you have for me?"
Know you're in good company would be a starting point.
The answer is yes to that question.
Hopefully my husband's not watching, and so I can say, yes, I hear you. But, one of the fascinating things about this just dramatic change in how we operate socially, is that the two of the things I hear the most are too much togetherness and loneliness. And so it just really, I think, speaks to us as sort of social beings that used to have a certain balance for how those things worked. And it's totally been turned on its head, and it's gotten, reboots a couple times this summer. So I would say, first of all, you're not alone, like, in the world. You're probably not alone in your house. There probably are other people figuring out, like, when can I just putter in the kitchen, or when can I have whatever, the television all by myself, or something like that. So, depending upon the age of your children, and what's going on if you have a partner in the house, it might be just a good idea to talk about it and say, how can we create some space in our togetherness for all of these months, and maybe approach it with some honesty, but some humor might be a way to start, and really know you're in good company. Yeah.
Dr. Paruch, next question for you, but I welcome Dr. Richter and Dr. Cradock to jump in here. What is the most important thing I can do to support my family's mental health?
The most important thing that you can do to support your family's mental health is to be kind. Now, I think that's a theme that we've had here, so I'm just going to keep going with that one. I think that the most important thing that you can do to support your family's health is to have an open dialogue, to be present when they need you, to check with them and ask if they need you, and when they need you, to ask open-ended questions about how they're feeling and what you can do to be supportive of their needs. I think it's a good starting point always to have a dialogue that is open and allows the person to be expressive in how they're thinking, what they're thinking about, and how they are feeling.
Okay, and so we are coming up on the hour. We have just a couple minutes left. So let's close with one last question. I'm going to ask that each of you answer this question, and really a little bit reflective, but thinking about all the questions that we've heard tonight and the discussions that we've had. What's the best piece of advice you can share with everyone watching tonight? Dr. Cradock, do you want to get us started?
Sure. I probably have said this a few times already this evening, but basically parents, or if you're a grandparent or a guardian, parents matter. They're smart about their kids. They know when something's up, and they also know what's going on in their community and their family, so that they know if their family has been personally impacted by COVID or their community. So they know the context, they know their kid, and they're smart about them. So we always trust parents to say, if you think there's something going on, please reach out to a number of the resources we've mentioned tonight, and know these are great questions to be asking.
Thank you. And Dr. Paruch, your best piece of advice?
The mind and the body interact together. They're not a separate entity, and there's a bidirectional relationship between the mind and the body. The way that we perceive the world, the way that we think and we feel, occurs in a manner in which it can affect us physically and emotionally. Health is comprised of not just physical health, but emotional health. We have to take time to focus in our mental health as well as our physical health. And if you feel there is something that creates a stigma attached to mental health and mental health treatment, there are ways to explore that and access those treatment options in a somewhat anonymous manner. And I think that's a really important point that I come across a lot, that people don't access appropriate mental health treatment because they're fearful of the stigma that could be attached to mental health treatment. But please know that mental health treatment is part of our overall health and affects our physical health in a bidirectional manner. So we have to make sure that the people that we're speaking to now know that they have a way to approach this in an anonymous manner. And I think some of the resources that we have here that we'll talk about at the end, Talk With Us, text Talk With Us, I think it's 6674. Mm-hmm. That is a good starting point. If you're not certain as to whether what you're experiencing is normal or abnormal, reach out to somebody who can help delineate and help you understand better if what you're experiencing requires a little bit of extra attention. I don't think that mental health, and this is my last point, I don't think that mental health needs to be addressed when a problem develops. I think we need to address it on an ongoing basis, just like we would anything that is physical in nature. We exercise, we know we need to exercise 30 minutes 5 times a week, but we also need to do things to prevent mental health problems from coming on. And that's talking to people, sharing our thoughts and our feelings, and also doing things like regularly scheduled deep breathing and meditation. Some of these things can be entirely transformative from not only the mental health standpoint, but from the physical health standpoint as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Richter.
Yeah, just to reiterate some of those comments there, if you're at all worried about your child's behavioral health or your own, reach out for help. That is something that is so hard to do, but what an amazing strength. I work with kids and teens every day, and they tell me what's going on with them, and I learn from them. I'm like, wow, I am so impressed that you just told me that. That is not easy for me to talk about what you're just talking about now, and if you're kind of worried about this way for your child's physical health, right? It's like, boom, phone call to the pediatrician. I'm not even thinking twice about it, but there is so much stigma around behavioral health. But let me tell you, it's never been easier to access. We have, at Children's, we have telehealth available and ready to go. And the case is the same. A lot of providers in the community have adapted really quickly as well. So reach out for help. You are not alone. This is not easy for behavioral health practitioners to ask for help and reach out. So just go for it. Take charge of your behavioral health.
Thank you, Dr. Cradock, Dr. Paruch, and Dr. Richter for joining us this evening. Before we close out, let's show that slide one more time with that information for BJC Behavioral Health. Again, free crisis services, free, confidential, and open to everyone. We talked about the numbers 314-747-7492, or you can text Talk With Us to 6674. We'll also mention that St. Louis Children's Hospital Teen Helpline for parents is 314-454-TEEN. Thank you all so much for watching this tonight and spending your evening with us. This session is recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it again, or if you want to share it on Facebook for your friends to see. So with that, we'd like to tell you all good night, good luck, and best wishes to everyone as we begin the new school year. Thank you. Bye-bye.